Good Monday morning to you. I am Dan Kopp, and I'm coming to you live from Madison, Wisconsin. And joining me, like always, is Ty Firsching.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning for you. It's afternoon for me. As you know, I'm in Entebbe, Uganda. It's been a great time here. It is rainy season, so if I black out, you lose me, I freeze, don't applaud, just know I'm coming back, okay? So it's usually
He will return. He will return. All right, so today, before we get into today's topic, which is leadership across sectors, I just want to remind you that if you're online watching this live, feel free to drop comments or questions into the box, and we will address any comments and questions you may have. If you're watching the replay or you're checking us out on our YouTube channel, which is called Enhanced Leadership, feel free to share, post about it, make comments, whatever. And most importantly, if you'd like to work with us and learn how you too can become an enhanced leader, our contact information is scrolling across the bottom of the screen, and you can always reach out to us directly on LinkedIn. So, without further ado, let's talk about today's topic, which is leadership across sectors. So when we talk about leadership across sectors, there's two things that come to mind, and Ty and I have talked about this offline for the last couple of years. And so the sectors in the economy are private, nonprofit, public, and military. Through our lens, those are the four sectors we're going to refer to. So you can think about leadership in each sector and how they inform your future, and the difference in leadership and the similarities in leadership between the two, or between the four rather. And you can also talk the path you take in different sectors on how to get to where you are in life, or where you aspire to be. So we've mentioned in the past, both Ty and I are U.S. Army veterans, and we started out literally in the military the same day. We had the same job. We were in basic training together. We went to the same company in Germany for 2+ years together. And then Ty transitioned out, and he was lower enlisted the entire time. I stayed in, became a non-commissioned officer. That led us different paths. We then, in the civilian world, and both ended up in education. Ty started teaching back in 2000. I started teaching in 2001. And from there, Ty stayed in education, stayed in the ranks as a teacher, stayed in the ranks, if you will. And I got into administration 5 years later and was a principal and a superintendent. So we've got leadership paths that we've followed that are similar, yet different enough that it's easy to see that his leadership has been informed as being one of the members of the rank and file, and mine has been partially that, but also through an administrative lens and a leadership lens, an official leadership position, if you will. My journey has been informed by that. But oddly enough, we came out on the other side of both those vastly different experiences with very similar viewpoints, similar experiences, and similar approaches to both life and leadership. Ty, do you want to throw anything in before we continue?
You know, it's funny because I did get out and I went into teaching, and you got out years later and went into teaching. But we had no idea either of us were going to go into teaching, because we had kind of lost contact with each other because the internet really wasn't a big deal back then. There's our age, right? It wasn't easy to find people. When we reconnected, we're like, wow, we both went into education, and we hadn't talked to each other for like 5 or 6 years, and we didn't know. Maybe it was even longer. Maybe it was a decade, I think.
It was 20 years, dude. 20.
Hey, I don't know math.
20
Anyway,
years. You left Germany in '89, and I literally got on Facebook in 2009 for the sole purpose of finding Ty. And 30 seconds after I had my profile on Facebook and my account created, it took me 30 seconds to find him. So literally 1989 to 2009, a 20-year gap.
Yeah, and Dan went in, like he said, he went into administration, and I went in and I was an advocate for students and teachers at our level. And so we both have this different lens. I never really wanted to be the man. I kind of like sticking it to the man, you know. So I never wanted to be the man. But when Dan got out, he's right. We both have these similar views Although from different perspectives, we understood the value of a certain particular enhanced leadership style that makes you effective in what you do. And then we both went into the business world after our realm in education. So there
And
you
here
go.
we are in
Yeah.
technically in the business world. We're leadership consultants, speakers, uh, trainers, that type of thing. And we rely on what we learned in the military. We rely on what we learned in public education. Ty has the added experience of having worked in a nonprofit. And what we found is skills are transferable, first of all. Several years ago, I was at a social event and somebody was doing a live broadcast, if you will, of the event. And he stuck the mic in my face and said, in 3 words, what do you want to tell transitioning veterans? And the first 3 words that came out of my mouth were skills are, and the only 3 words, skills are transferable. So you've got leadership skills now, regardless of where you are in your organization, regardless of what type of organization you're in, you've got the ability to lead from where you are, whether you're, excuse me, whether you're in the rank and file, if you will, and relatively low on the organizational chart, or if you have risen in the organizational chart and you're first level, middle level, senior level executive leader, or whatever you want to call it, you've got the skills and the ability and the choice to lead right now. And when you do that, you're going to become a better leader and a better human being. Because the more you lead, the better you lead, the better overall being you become. You'll become a better companion, a better father, a better mother, a better son or daughter, whatever the case may be. Your leadership skills, if you consciously attempt to grow them and apply them, you will become a better leader and better at life. It's simply stated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you think about where you are right now in your journey, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, don't assume that you've sort of limited your options for the future if you've only been in business, or you've only been in the public sector, or you're in the military, for crying out loud. Everything you've done up until this point is getting you ready for the next step, regardless of the sector you're in. And there is a difference between sectors, and Ty and I have spoke about this offline. The difference, like military and public education, yes, we have to be cognizant of the bottom line in regard to we can't spend above our budget, ideally, but we don't have to turn around and go make money to have a thriving organization. Ty has had the experience in both business and in nonprofits where he's had to not only worry about the bottom line, but also how to make that bottom line remain black every year. Where's that money coming from? And how do we raise money to continue to be a viable organization? Ty, I know you've got a lot of thoughts on this topic.
I do. I was thinking as you were describing our paths, in my mind, I was going through, wow, yeah, I did that, and what transferred over, what didn't. Going from the military to education, other than the school aspect, we had to go to college to do that, right? But other than that, we were experts in paperwork by the time we left the military. I mean, redundant paperwork, a plethora of paperwork that you wouldn't even need to do in any other organization. And so transferring to education, I thought I'd get out of it, and I didn't. We had paperwork there, and you saw it too. You had paperwork for every single thing you did because we were accountable at every time. And some of it made sense and some of it didn't. But that skill set remained the same. I transferred over when I was in college. I used my military experience to get involved. And I thought it was a very good idea to get involved. And I started volunteering here and there. And I ended up actually becoming director of the volunteer placement agency for the University of Colorado. And I employed what I learned in the military into that. And it actually worked because most of the people that got into volunteering are just students that had volunteered or students that haven't done anything. And being significantly older than most students, most freshmen, I was the age of basically a postdoc by the time I went to college after I got out, and then I went to college. So my age and my experience in the military allowed me a little different perspective. Well, we can do this. And as I did that, my initial thing was not to become a math teacher. I was going to go into philosophy, but that all changed because I didn't want to go in for a PhD. I ended up realizing that I like dealing with people. So I ended up in education, and I transferred what I learned as a volunteer director for the placement service into education of how to motivate students, not only have classroom management, but motivate students. After about a decade and a half of teaching, I went into the business world, into the tech sector. And then I used what I'd learned in that into the tech sector in dealing with client relations. And you treat client relations just like you do students. If you want to motivate them, you go, yes, we can do this. This is how we get it done. Now, in the tech sector, this would have been in the mid 2010s, there was something going on. And Dan, you might remember when we were in the service, before we went on patrol, we were both military police officers. We had a block of instruction that was no more than 2 or 3 minutes before we went, and they taught us some skill that we probably had learned one time before, or they refreshed our memory. Whether it was holding a flashlight to a gun, if you're going in a secure area at night, or whatever, something to refresh your memory. We had these little blocks of instruction all the time. Every time we worked, we had one. And in the tech sector in the mid 2000s or 2010s, this is a huge popular thing. The reason, one of the advocates for this is the influx of veterans that got out, and every aspect of the military uses these micro learning sessions, or these 5-minute blocks of instructions, as they were called back then. And it helped push the popularity, not only in the tech sector, but all around, of micro learning sessions. And as leaders, people saw the value in this, and now it is really popular. I mean, you can't go into a board meeting without having some type of little 2-minute drill, micro learning session. Do this, this is what we do, to remind you. And now it's even effective. And well, you see, I forget the name, Nibbles or something like that. There's a website, you can Nibbles or bite-sized components or something like that, where this is the learning. This is the learning for the industry. This is what we do. This is how we get our information across. This is leadership. It's not only leadership recognizes this is an effective tool, and we bring it. But it's funny how it came. I really believe it came from the military, because we're in there in the 80s. We were doing it way before anybody else does. But anyway, that's just one verification of, look, cross-sector leadership works. You can't say, oh, you're not in this industry, you don't know what you're doing. That's wrong. That's bad thinking. Okay? You have to think like a leader. You go, you know what? He's going to bring something dynamic here, not only from the military, or if you go the other way. But anyway, that's back to you.
I agree 100%, Ty. And two thoughts came to mind. You said something specifically about sometimes skills you take with them and say, hey, I can use this in my new role, and others you leave behind. And there's a couple of examples and I had never thought about this until you just said this. One's pretty obvious. Military, conceptually, most people can understand how it's somewhat autocratic in nature at times. You're leading a team or a squad, and you say, do this, and they do it, period. That's the logical assumption that's made about the military, and oftentimes it's true. But when you take that autocratic approach to leadership, it works at times and is necessary at times, but it should never be a veteran's go-to way of leading. And an example of when it is necessary, you're leading an organization and there's an emergency. There's oftentimes not the luxury of being able to say, hey, let's have a democratic process. Let's do a meeting and talk about what. No, you've got to react. And, clearing a building. We've got a fire alarm or there's an active shooter. Let's hope not that ever occurs, but we've got an emergency here where people are in danger. It's time to be autocratic. It's not time to be participatory. There's a skill set that you bring with you from the military and other places, but you perhaps learn it in the military. You can employ it as needed, but it should never be your go-to. Another thing, you talked about paperwork, and I had never thought about this. One of the things I help the people I coach and mentor and train, I help them do is understand the importance of communication. And I always stress it's got to be clear and succinct.
Mhm.
And I think back to all the military police reports. Police report on a daily basis. You go out and write 5 or 10 reports of what you did that day, and it's the who, what, when, where, and not necessarily why. But you've got to be clear and succinct so somebody can read that paragraph or two synopsis and understand everything that occurred. Now, it doesn't necessarily include all the statements and all the evidence and all that, but it's a clear, concise synopsis of what occurred. And that's how I like to communicate when I'm leading, and that's how I help others communicate when they're leading. And repeat it, throwing back your micro-learning. It's got to be clear and succinct and repeated. Like if you're an organizational leader, you make a substantive change to something you're doing, you better communicate that out. If, let's say, you're looking through the lens of benefits and you've got benefits that you provide your people, well, they get it when they onboard. Most people don't look at that stuff again until they need it. So it's incumbent upon leaders to communicate out, hey, just remember, we've got an employee assistance program. Even if it's just annually, nothing changed from one fiscal year to another. You should at least communicate annually about those things so people are aware that they have them. If there's a substantive change, communicate that as well, clearly and succinctly. I remember I worked with a guy and I was at a board meeting where he was presenting, and I had worked with him in that, and he's like, I did it. I got it down and I presented it. It was less than 5 minutes. How do you think it went? And I said, well, yes, it was less than 5 minutes, but I counted 27 questions after you were done talking because you weren't clear on what you were saying. You were succinct. You said it succinctly in 5 minutes, but you left so many gaping holes in your summary that it literally led to 27 questions. So focus on being clear and succinct. And that is something I brought over without realizing until Ty said that. I brought over that from the military police days, because you have to be clear and succinct when you're writing 5 or 10 police reports a day. And then the police desk sergeant's taking all these in and trying to make an understanding of what occurred on a 24-hour basis. So I really like what Ty said in regard to, you're going to learn stuff in one sector that you can take to another. And there are things that you might learn in one sector that you might leave behind, but skills are definitely transferable.
Yeah, you just hit something when you're talking about writing the reports and how it had to be clear and succinct. I never really talk about, but I've wrote a few grants and I've gotten a few government grants, and I never had any training in grant writing, and I got a $250,000 grant for a literacy program when I was working as a student in college. And I helped write that grant. And they're like, where did you learn how to write like that? I'm like, it just comes naturally. And I didn't even dawn on me that it came from writing reports every day, that this is the reason why we did this. Boom, boom, boom. And
Right.
Grant writing is similar. You create the need, you have the response, and you show that it worked, and that was it, So thanks for triggering that memory. I like it,
I actually had somebody I mentored working in the same organization, and he told me he kept a database of all the emails I sent out so he could learn to communicate as well as I did. I was like, hey, that's a little creepy, I think. Okay, but it worked. He rose through the ranks, and he was a good leader when he got an official position, and he's doing well. So,
oh, that's great. Yeah, that's.
Yeah,
it's just so funny because so many skills transfer, and that's one thing I want to. If you're a leader and you're out there and you have someone from another sector and you don't see anything that they're bringing in, ask them what they can bring in, because they probably don't know. Like, I didn't realize that my grant writing or that my writing style came from a certain aspect.
Yeah.
So as a leader, I think it's your job to recognize that and become that enhancer. They're like, hey, look, this guy comes from a different sector. What can he bring in, or what can she bring in to our organization that we haven't ever used before, because we are in a different sector? Because a lot of times you're just tunnel vision in your sector.
Oh, yeah.
It's better where you're cross sector analysis and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And as somebody did a lot of hiring of educators through my career, if we had two candidates and one went high school, college, right into the teaching workforce, the other one was high school, some experience, then college, or high school, college, then some experience in industry, and I was leaning more apt to hire the person who had some type of industry or other than educational experience in their background, because it made them a more complete educator. And
Yeah.
Same thing with leaders. If we look at, we're hiring people in, they've got experiences that drew you towards them. It isn't about how they performed in an interview. That's a minor part of what they did to land that job. It's what they have in their background, what they've done in previous positions. That's what you want to pull out of them and embrace, because skills are transferable.
Absolutely. And that's the whole idea behind it. Skills are transferable.
Right on. All right, Ty, it's been another good discussion. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. Our emails are at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to become an enhanced leader. You can also contact us directly on LinkedIn. And you can always check us out over on our YouTube channel. It's called Enhanced Leadership. And finally, if you actually like our content, jump on both of our profile pages. Across from our pictures, there's a little bell. You can hit that bell and you can follow our content. You'll get real-time notifications of when we've gone live or posted other things. So Ty, any closing thoughts?
No, if you do have someone from a sector and you can't see what they're bringing in, give Dan or I a shout out, because we will help you identify or give you ideas of what they've gone through. Because I've worked, like as Dan said, military, education, nonprofits, and the business sector. And Dan's done all those except the nonprofit, although education kind of can be considered that a little bit, because you're dealing with all this other stuff that the nonprofits deal with. But give us a holler. We'll help you out.
All right. Well, that's it for this week. And we are confident that you have within you the power to lead. And we've just been talking about leadership. This is leadership, and you can do it. Good luck.
Have a good day.